Hello, this is Old Man Tony here again. It's a beautiful sunny day. The skies are all blue and it's 20.5 degrees Celsius, which that makes it about 70 Fahrenheit, so perfect day for a ride. And welcome to part 2 of the Q&A. And where's part 2 going to take us? We'll find out soon enough. So onward to the first Q&A location. Well, here we are at the beach. We've got beautiful scenery, so why not? So I thought I'd come down and show you around. Found a place with not many people so I can talk freely. And here, I thought I'd tell you all about my bike history. So I've had quite a lot of questions about bike history. Tim, Mr. TPR, Phantom Rides, Brad C, Sparky Rides, Kazawaki, Springy 2112. They've all asked about my bike history. Well, I haven't owned a huge number of bikes in my time, but I started out riding first of all when I was about 14, and what got me into bikes was a project we had when I was in the Scouts, and we got a scooter. I can't remember if it's a Lambretta or a Vespa, but we turned it into a little chopper scooter and used to ride it around the yard at where the scout hut was. So that really gave me the taste for it. That was followed by me and 3 other friends. We started buying bikes up. We started buying what you'd call shed finds, barn finds, those kind of bikes. Back in the early 70s, there were a tremendous amount of people who'd got an old bike in the shed, which someone had finished riding years ago, and then moved on to cars and families and all that sort of thing. And we could buy these things probably for about 20 or 25 pounds. So if we stuck just £5 in each ourselves, we could buy the bike, get it running, and then sneakily ride it on the airfield I lived on. Luckily there were no planes flying at the time, but the Air Force Police didn't really like it, so they used to chase us occasionally. And I think we had 3 different bikes, so we used to ride them until we couldn't fix them anymore. I think the first was an AJS. I think it was a 650 twin, probably dating from the 1950s, so I don't know what model it was. And we had that and rode that for a while, but then we managed to blow the engine up. I don't know if we hadn't got enough oil in it or something like that, or maybe the oil wasn't flowing, but it was completely ruined after we'd finished with it. We did try and strip the engine down and fix it, but there were too many broken bits inside to be able to do a decent job. So we ended up with a whole load of boxes full of bits, and I can't remember how we got rid of it, but we did. I think we replaced that probably with an old Triumph. I seem to think that might have been my first Triumph. Again, I think that was a twin. It's probably around a 650 or something, probably, you know, from the 1950s. But we never got that one going. So I think that was probably sold on to finance the next bike, which was a BSA 500. So that was a single cylinder side valve. I can't remember the number designation. That was a good old thumper. We had a lot of problems with the clutch, so we used to have to bump start it and then get going on the run. You could crash your way through the gears, and it helped you learn to be able to change down a gear while your engine was running without a clutch, which was, you know, all good for the education. But that was the last one, and I think then we probably moved on, you know, moved house to a different area because my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved on quite a lot. About that time, must have been when we were all turning 16, a few of my friends got mopeds, and it was the era of the start of the first sports mopeds for 16-year-olds in the UK. A friend of mine got a Putsch. I can't remember what model it was. It looked a bit like a motorbike, and I think it had pedals, and I think you could fold one of the pedals back, so they ended up like footrests, but the law said they had to have pedals. So I had a few goes on that, running up and down the airfield, and then we moved on, and I carried on at school a bit longer till I was 18, and when I'd finished school I decided I wasn't going to college and got myself a job, and I needed to commute. So then that was my first road bike. I wanted a 250, but my dad said I had to have a new one, and the best new 250 I could afford was, you know, I couldn't afford, just outside my price bracket. So I ended up with a Suzuki GT 125. This was about 1975. So that was my first official bike on the road, the one I learned to ride on the road on, really. It was quite a pokey little machine for a 125. It was 2-stroke of course, so it used to rev quite highly. I think I used to abuse it too much. I remember having to replace the pistons 2 or 3 times in the 18 months that I had it. But then I ended up with a girlfriend who wasn't keen on pillion in winter, and after I'd passed my test on my 125, I was going to get something bigger and pokier, but she was keen, as it was winter, that we had something warmer. And at that time, on a motorbike licence in the UK, you could ride a 3-wheeler car, so long as it wasn't too big and heavy. That's what I ended up buying. It was a Reliant Regal 330. I think it had a 750 4-cylinder engine, so it was close to what I'd want in a bike, but it was a bit heavier and not quite so fast. It would accelerate and beat anyone away from the lights, but it ran out of steam about 60 miles an hour. But I did get caught speeding in it once when I exceeded a 50 limit, doing about 60, so I did get a speed ticket in a 3-wheeler car. Then I didn't have bikes for quite a while. I got married and started to have children, so other priorities came into it, mortgages, so I didn't really have any spare money for a fun machine. I didn't even have any spare money so that we could have a car and a motorcycle at the time. So I was bikeless for quite a while then. And then a friend at work was selling a Suzuki GT 250, and he only wanted £100 for it. So that was ideal as my second transport, so the wife could have the car, so she could ferry the children around and that sort of thing, from a friend at work. And that gave me back my lust for bikes again, and it was quite a bit easier to ride than the 125 that I'd had a few years previously. Just that little bit more poke. That got me back into biking again. It was our second vehicle for a few years. Then again, I think it failed its annual inspection, the MOT test we call it in the UK. I couldn't afford to fix it, so I was back just to being a car driver for a while. I kept it in my garage for quite a long time, until one of my daughters, who was about 15 at the time, one of her boyfriends persuaded me to sell it. So I let them have it for a few pounds to see if they could do it up. Payback really, how I got into biking. So hopefully they got into biking at some point and didn't just do it up and sell it and make some money. But there we go. So after that, bikeless again for a while. I moved on so that I was getting on towards 50. I had a bit more spare cash. The children were growing up a bit, so they didn't need so much from me. So I couldn't wait till my 50th birthday, so I think when I was 48 or 49, I went out and bought a Suzuki SV1000. That was one of my favourite bikes I owned. It was certainly a revelation in how easy it was to ride compared to the old bikes. A lot of fun as well. I had great character in that V-twin engine. Only about 120 brake horsepower, but plenty enough performance for me. And I actually kept that bike for 10 years, running it for 10 years. I think I'd got to about 58 then, 59. Things changed at work. They wanted me to relocate, but I wasn't keen on moving at that age. So I took early retirement and got a payoff and bought my Triumph Tiger 800, which is what you see in my videos now. So that's my biking history. Yeah, so not owned many bikes, but I've enjoyed every one that I have owned. So thank you all you guys for your question on bikes. And just another bike related question. Roadside Channel has asked me, what type of fuel mileage does my Tiger get? Well, it gets about 50 to the gallon, but that's 50 to the UK gallon, so that would probably relate to about 40 to the US gallon. Just one more question here at this location before we move on. This one comes from Spiky over there in North Wales. Does great videos, so it's worth going to check out his channel. And he's just asking when I'm coming to North Wales. I'd like to come tomorrow to North Wales. It's a beautiful place to ride a bike. I've only been on a bike once there, and I was mainly just passing through, so I didn't have a chance to have very much of an explore. Hopefully I'll be coming back soon. It'll be difficult to know when. We'll work it out at some point. So that's the questions for now. Let's move on to the next location. Here we've got another location for you. Now some more questions and answers. Viper 6, who's everywhere. I think he makes more comments than I do on videos, and that's saying something. So Viper 6 says, do I have any superstitions or rituals before I ride? Well, actually the only thing I do is I always put my left glove on before my right glove, and I've tried not to get into anything else. Big Kev from Australia, O2 Big Kev, asked, do I speak any other languages? Because I always put some translations on my videos. Don't speak any other languages, just a little bit here and there. What I did notice that I'd got a few regular commenters from Japan and Portugal and Brazil on my channel, so just as a courtesy I put Portuguese and also some Japanese translations just to help them along a bit. But predominantly most of my subscribers are English speaking, so there you go. Adrian Thompson asked, what music do I like? So Adrian Thompson, you often see him riding around on various bikes around Wales and Shropshire. Beautiful part of the country. And well, the music I like, sort of everything really. Some modern classical music that I'm not keen of. It seems just a bit tuneless. Most other music seems to be fine to me. And while we're talking about Wales, Bick Mitchum asked the question, if animals could talk, what would be the rudest? I kind of think it might be a rhinoceroses. The rhinoceroses always seem look quite rude to me, so they'd, in my mind, be the rudest animal. But you never know, it could be something else. Randy's Rides asked, why do they have those obstructions on the road causing a bottleneck? Well, it's simple really. It's just a bit like those sleeping policeman type humps they put on the road just to slow down the traffic. They usually be the entrance to a small village or somewhere. They'd want the traffic to slow down, so they make a bit of a chicane, force people to slow down. Rune Holton from Norway. Yeah, he's a Norwegian. He's another greedy one, asked 5 different questions, but we don't mind. And he asked what I used to work with. Well, I used to work in the sugar business. My main job was developing new technology, a bit of project management. I built various laboratories for the company around the place. I brought in ethanol production into the UK sugar industry, and I did a bit of work in South Africa and with our Spanish colleagues, and also with our Chinese colleagues. I never got to travel to China, but I did extensively travel, particularly when we were developing the new technologies, finding out what the best of around the world was and could we adapt it to suit our own. So what country is my favourite to ride? Oh, well, that's an easy one really, because I've only ever ridden in the UK. I do like riding in the UK, it's quite varied, but I'd quite like to go to New Zealand, and I'd love to go to Norway. His next question is, what do I think of electric bikes? Well, if I could afford one and justify them, and if I was still commuting a reasonably short distance into work, then I might consider an electric bike. It would be ideal. I think the only thing I've got against electric bikes is the range and the charging time. You just have to change your style of riding to suit them. But I think they can be just as good petrol or gas bikes, but they just don't sound quite so good. And what social media do I like most? Well, I quite like Instagram. It's quite easy just to post a picture of where you are and what you're doing. So Instagram's my favourite, but I do get involved in YouTube and Facebook, but I don't think I do any of the other things. His final question is, who is your favourite Norwegian photographer? And that, of course, is you, Rune, the best Norwegian photographer I've ever come across. And while we're on the subject of Scandinavia, Dark Visor asked me a question, and he wanted to know, have I ever been to Scandinavia? Well, I have been to Scandinavia. I've been to Finland, I've been to Norway, I've been to Denmark, but mostly I've been to Sweden. I've been to Sweden probably 7 or 8 different times, up into the northish to a town called Olnodvik, but I'm probably saying that wrong, to Stockholm, and then right to the south of the country. I think I went to a conference there once, so yeah, I've been to Sweden a few times and I really love it there. And then Dave and Angies Adventures have just asked me, when am I coming to the States? I don't know when the next time I'll be coming to the States. Afraid I just can't afford it, but I'd love to come back, and who knows when it might be. And where can I rent a bike in the UK? Well, bike rentals are a bit funny in the UK. These places open up and close down. So I don't know anywhere locally you can rent a bike. I know my daughter was trying to rent a bike for a partner for a treat, but she didn't find anywhere locally to me. But I think it's just a matter of getting on the internet and searching. So I think I've answered enough questions in this location now. I think it's time we moved on. Bye. The sun's gone in now, just behind the clouds for a while, but I'm back home, and I've got a few more questions to go through to complete the set. So I'm in my backyard, or my back garden, depending on which part of the world you live in, what you call it. And behind me is the biggest bit of woodworking I've ever done. It's the gazebo shelter in my back garden, and in there with the pizza oven as well. So JP 1970, I think he's in Nevada, and he's asked, how is riding in England? I think riding in England is like riding anywhere in the world. It's amazing and wonderful. I don't know any other feeling quite like it, but you know, riding a motorcycle is such fun. Next question's from Freedom Rider. Is, do I know Paul Fosbury? Well, Paul is an English motovlogger. He's a bit older than me. I think he's got 20 odd years on me, but he still rides his bike. I think he's in his 80s. He still loves riding. I don't think he has any other kind of transport. I think he told me via a comment that he'd got an old car that he hadn't had out of a garage since the 1990s. So he's a good lad, but I only know him through YouTube like everybody else. Next question is from CAE Cruz. He asking, since I've been motovlogging, do I find myself riding more often? It's difficult to say. I kind of started motovlogging as I finished work, really. So I think it's about 4 years ago I started, and that's when I got my Triumph Tiger and stopped working. So I don't know, I do find myself thinking I must go out and do a motovlog. So maybe it's true that I might, but I used to ride to work a lot on my motorbike before, so I do fewer miles now, but I probably do more trips. Next question from Skeggy is, what are your views on servicing your own bike? I think it's a good thing. It helps to get to know the bike a lot better. I haven't serviced my current bike yet, mainly because it's been under warranty, but so long as I'm not feeling lazy, then I'll probably service my own when it's due in a couple of months' time. So I think it's a good thing. I think everybody should at least know how to service their bike, even if they don't service it themselves. Sun's out again, so back with the sunglasses on again. Lucky Luke Rides has asked me a question, have I ever been involved in an accident, and if not, what's the closest call? Well, it's interesting that you go by the name of Lucky Luke, because I do have one or two little superstitions, and one of them is I never talk about incidents I've had on the bike. I think it's tempting fate to talk about things like that. Needless to say, when I started out learning to ride a bike on the road, pushing its limits, I did find the ditch once or twice. But I haven't done anything recently, but now I've gone and said it. I've got to go and touch some wood. Big Dave talks. I think Big Dave's in Texas, and he's asking, what are my views on the US versus the UK licensing laws? And that's mainly because you have to jump through a lot of hoops in Europe to be able to ride a bike on the road. It's a lot simpler to do it in North America, but and particularly the US. But I think it's probably a good thing that you do have to go through these things. Having the age restrictions as well is probably a good thing. I hate to think what I'd have done on a big bike when I was 17 or 18 year old. I think we've probably gone a little bit too far in this country, and it's discouraging from people from taking up riding. I think it's generally a good thing. The best 1A. So Bruce, how many motorcycles I've owned? Well, I answered that in another question, so I won't do that one again. And how long have I been woodworking? I think I've answered that as well in another question. But I've been woodworking more seriously, let's put it that way, for the last 4 or 5 years, but I've always done a bit fixing up houses and that sort of thing. So I like to teach myself new skills, and I love working with my hands. He also asked who taught me woodworking. Well, I'm probably self-taught, and I've learned a few new techniques on YouTube. So YouTube's a pretty good teacher. I'm sure we've all used it for all sorts of things. Who taught me to ride a motorcycle? Well, again, I think I taught myself. I'm not sure anybody actually gave me any instruction. There was no such thing as compulsory bike training when I started. You just looked what other people did and copied them, really. So it's kind of self-taught come watching and learning, really. Epic Adam Motovlogs. So Adam, down in the southwest of the UK, he's wondering who my favourite comedian is and why. Ah, that's a really good question. I think it's difficult to choose one, but I think I prefer the offbeat humour, the less obvious humour. Nobody really comes to mind that is hitting me between the eyes just now. Needless to say, I do like a bit of comedy, so long as it's off the wall and wacky stuff. A Biker's Quest for Coffee asked, do I know the Muffin Man? I think he probably means the one who lives down Drury Lane. I don't think I've ever met him. And the final question comes from Bimble, and I'm sure all of you know Bimble. He produces some of the kind of comedy that I like. Perhaps that is an answer for Epic Adam. Is he my favourite? Could be, because I watch YouTube more than I watch anything else these days, by far. So Bimble asked, if we lived in a world with no internal combustion engines, with no bikes or cars, but all animals were big enough to ride, what would I choose to ride? Well, actually Bimble said he'd pick a squirrel called Cyril and ride on the Wirral. What would I ride? I think it would be a bumblebee. A bumblebee, mainly because it makes the right kind of noise, and if you scaled it up to or big enough for a human to ride, you could actually fly, and it would make that great motorcycle sound. Yes, I'd choose a bumblebee, but I can't think of anything to rhyme with it. So thank you very much, Bimble.
Well, that was part 2 of my Q&A, so thank you everyone again for answering the questions. I hope I've answered all of them, but if I just happen to have missed you, I'm very sorry, and if you'd like to leave your question again in the comments down below, I'll answer them down there. And if you didn't get a chance to ask a question the first time round, I'll be happy to answer it again. Put it in the comments down below and I'll tell you a bit more about myself. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you'd like to make a comment, please leave it down below. Let me know what you liked, what you don't like, and what you want to see more of, because I really love the comments. Subscribers are great, I really love my subscribers, but it's the comments that give me the thrill. Find that somebody's actually watched it and asking me a question, or just making a comment, and I try to answer all the comments. So again and again and again, thank you very much for watching. This has been Old Man Tony. Goodbye.